Welcome back. In today's lecture, we're going to look at the 4 ingredients you need to create a successful composting pile. Now, we've started to learn throughout this course that composting is the controlled decomposition of organic matter by microorganisms. It consists of a layer of decayed organic matter, and this comes in the form of browns and greens that we're going to learn about today. And if you are able to build a successful pile, the compost that you'll create can be used for fertilizing your plants, your yard, conditioning your land. Our soils here in Florida are very sandy, so it helps to retain water as well when you use it. And in general, it's a great way to divert food waste from going into the landfill. So I like to use this graphic here. It comes from the Green Sports Alliance, and it shows browns plus greens plus water plus air divided by macro and microorganisms equal composting. I like to use 4 different categories that are similar, and I like to use shelter, food, air, and water as my 4 components we're going to talk about today. So let's start with the first one, known as shelter. And shelter is going to be the largest part of your composting bin. It's the house. It's the main bulk of your pile. And they are considered the browns. They're considered brown because they're high in carbon. They tend to be woody type materials that are brown in color. So when you think of browns, think of leaves, think of straw, think of mulch, pine needles, different types of woody sticks and materials. And this is going to be that kind of base material for your composting bin. The second ingredient we need to go into your bin is the food waste, and these are known as the greens. Greens are higher in nitrogen content than the browns are, but in volume and amount, you're going to have less of the greens, less of the food waste in your pile than you will with the browns or the higher in carbon material. Examples of food that you can use are fruits, vegetables, bread, coffee grounds can be put in there. Yard clippings are also considered a little bit higher in nitrogen. You can add those into your bin. A general rule of thumb that I use is anything that is produced or grown from a plant, you can put in your compost bins. What you want to stay away from are food items such as meat, chicken, seafood. We don't want anything from dairy. We don't want to put a lot of egg material or oily material into your bin. What's going to happen is those things are going to attract pests. So we want to stay away from those in your bin. I get asked about eggshells a lot. Eggshells are okay to use. You may want to rinse them out because the gooiness and the yolks and the white in there inside can attract pests. So you want to make sure to kind of clean those out if you have time to do that. So when you balance your browns and your greens together, you're going to come up with this carbon to nitrogen ratio. And if you go online and you do a lot of searches through the composting websites, you'll see this number 30-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have 30 browns, like 30 pieces of mulch to every green, which 1 strawberry. So it's more of what is built into how they break down. It's more about the ratio and the content of the materials. And I'll talk about that in a second. Great things to use, obviously the nitrogen, vegetables, fruits, greens, lawn clippings, coffee grounds, and keep away from that meat and dairy, like I mentioned. So in this chart here, you can see I have a bunch of different materials listed, ranging from coffee grounds all the way to wood at the bottom. The second column shows the carbon to nitrogen ratio. So if I circle a few of them here, you can see coffee grounds are 20-to-1, grass clippings 20-to-1, table scraps a little less than that, as well as vegetables. These are considered greens. They are higher in nitrogen content. So the first number that you see in the carbon column is going to be generally a lower number. The lower that number, the lower the ratio, therefore it's going to have more nitrogen content. If I circle a few of the browns here, look at the leaves, I have straw circled, sawdust, you can see the carbon to nitrogen ratio is much higher, 60 to 1, 80 to 1, 600 to 1. And this makes sense. So if you were to take a piece of lettuce and compare that to a block of wood, you'll know that there's much more carbon in the wood material. It's going to take a lot longer to break down sticks and woody material than it is those nitrogen items. So that's kind of how they compare and contrast those two when they build that nice ratio. As you get better with composting, you'll learn to balance out your bin a little bit better and have a more effective system, but it just takes a little bit of practice. The third ingredient that we need is air. Why is air needed? Well, composting is an aerobic process. And what I mean by aerobic is it takes aerobic bacteria that need oxygen and air in order to survive. When you think about when we go out and exercise, it's known as aerobics. We take in a lot of oxygen and our bodies heat up. The same thing's happening in your composting pile when you build it correctly and get that air in there. You're attracting these microorganisms and they're going to take in the oxygen and they're going to heat up your pile. So when you build your pile, it's going to be at an ambient temperature, say 70 degrees outside. Within a few days, you're going to notice that temperature start to rise, 80, 85, 90, 95 and above. That's because it's working. You've attracted this bacteria in your pile. So it works really well. On the flip side, it's known as anaerobic. When conditions get starved of oxygen, the absence of air, it creates this anaerobic condition that often smells. So if you go out to your bin and you notice that there's this kind of foul odor to it, it's because there's no air into the system. You're going to need to turn the compost and get the air flowing through it again. It's producing biogases instead of attracting the aerobic bacteria that we want. And that leads us to our fourth ingredient here, which is water. You need to keep your compost nice and damp. It needs that moisture in there for these microbes to survive. You can get a little moisture meter if you want. You want to keep it about 40 to 60%, kind of that mid-range, but you want your compost to feel damp, kind of like a damp sponge, but don't make it too wet. Don't douse it down completely, because what can happen is you can create too much water in there, will block out a lot of the airflow in your pile, causing those anaerobic conditions and that foul odor. But you definitely want to go out there every time you add your compost and make sure you water all around the edges, get it kind of mixed in there really good. As you turn your compost, add that water in. As you add food waste into your compost, add some more water in. This helps with the breaking down of the materials. I mentioned those four ingredients. If you get them correctly, you're going to get some microorganisms mixed in there. Here are your two main bacteria that do the work. You have this mesophilic bacteria and thermophilic bacteria. The mesophils, or mesophiles as they're called, operate in kind of the range of 68 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. They do most of the composting work. That's where your pile is going to sit most of the time. So they're going to come in and break it down. If you do get a perfect balance of your material, if you cut it up in great pieces and you mix it in really well and you get good airflow and a great carbon to nitrogen ratio, you'll be able to get that temperature way up over that 113, maybe 120, 130 degree temperature, and you're going to attract these thermophilic bacteria, and it's going to actually be very beneficial if you do have certain seeds or any sort of pathogens or invasive type grasses that you got into your pile. So if you're concerned about some of those things getting in there, you need to try to get that temperature up for at least 3 days at 170 degrees to kill off those seeds. One of the things you'll notice, and a lot of people, if you talk to have composted before, they will have some of the plants go right out of their compost. They'll have, because they have peppers they've thrown away with the seeds, or they'll have tomato plants grow right out of their compost. This is perfectly normal. You've created a really wonderful nitrogen-rich environment for these seeds, so they're going to grow really, really well, which is fine. But if you're worried about that invasive type stuff, you need to be careful about getting those temperatures up. And then you also get a lot of these macroorganisms in there, these invertebrates. You're going to have sow bugs and pill bugs and millipedes, spiders. Sometimes you'll get some worms mixed in there, but don't confuse this with the process of vermicomposting, which is a little bit different. You're going to get some fungi in there. You're going to get all kinds of different cobwebs in there. And it's going to help create that nice earthy smell in later stages. Just if you do get a lot of that fungi or mold or different things in there, just kind of turn your compost, mix it up, blend it into your pile, keep it nice and damp, and you'll have a lot of success combining those 4 ingredients to attract these essential macro and micro organisms to do the breakdown. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at rpen@ufl.edu.